Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the Generation 3 Plus Small Modular Reactor Solicitation Informational Webinar. I'm Christina Walrand. I'm a Senior Advisor in the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, and my colleagues and I are really excited to have you here with us today to go over what has changed over the past number of months and to introduce this solicitation to you. So before we begin the session, I want to go over a few webinar logistics. So please know that this webinar will only include publicly available information provided by the broad agency announcement. Attending the webinar and watching this recording is completely voluntary. It won't impact an applicant's selection. This webinar is not a rule or a regulation. If there are any inconsistencies between the BAA or broad agency announcement and the statements in this webinar, the BAA is the controlling document. You can turn on live captions by clicking Show Captions in your control panel. To turn on Spanish interpretation, please click on the English button in your control panel. Zoom recently updated it, so it may say interpretation there as well if you have an older version. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we will be publishing it in the slides on OSED's website within the coming days. Great. So one of the reasons why we are so excited about this opportunity is because the Department of Energy views advanced nuclear technologies, which are being developed to provide clean, reliable, and fixed power, as critical to our nation's energy portfolio. In DOE's Pathways to Commercial Liftoff series of reports, we estimate that the United States will need 700 to 900 gigawatts of additional clean, firm capacity to meet our net zero emissions goals by 2050. And nuclear power is among the only proven options that can deliver this magnitude of reliable baseload power to meet our increasing energy requirements. We see many variables that are driving the demand growth in energy today, things like growth in artificial intelligence and data centers, onshoring of energy-intensive industries like semiconductor fabrication, electrifying manufacturing processes, uptake of electric vehicles, and the need to replace aging fossil infrastructure to meet our decarbonization targets. So today, you'll hear more about how this opportunity can help meet the need that we're seeing, at least play a role in it. And we will provide you an overview of information to help prospective applicants through the process. So in terms of a quick agenda, today we will be covering a high-level overview of the Generation 3 Plus Small Modular Reactor solicitation, including what's updated since the Notice of Intent. I would refer everyone as well, if you're interested for additional resources, that the Notice of Intent webinar was published on OSED's website and provides some additional context for this opportunity. We'll then go into applying to Tier 1, applying to Tier 2, thinking through some of the application materials and next steps and resources. So in terms of the updated information in the broad agency announcement, to kick us off, I want to step back on the program goal of this opportunity, which is really to focus DOE and non-federal resources on a credible and sustainable pathway to fleet-level deployment of Gen 3 Plus small modular reactors. So there are two tiers of funding in this opportunity. Tier 1, led by OSED and with support from the National Nuclear Security Administration, who you'll hear from in a little bit, is aiming to fund near-term utility commercial deployments of Gen 3 Plus small modular reactor technologies that are really positioned to help catalyze an order book of additional deployments. We're looking for multi-entity project teams to help manage this first mover risk associated with the early deployments. There's up to $800 million in this tier. Tier 2 is for fast follower deployment support. It's led by the Office of Nuclear Energy, and you'll hear from my colleague in a little bit as well. So this is really designed to provide funding to ensure that the domestic nuclear industry maintains momentum for follow-on deployments. And it gives us an opportunity to address key gaps that have hindered the domestic nuclear industry previously, including siting initiatives, the supply chain, and cost and schedule development. So for the purposes of this solicitation, we have defined the small modular reactor, Gen 3 Plus small modular reactor. There is a detailed description in the document. At a high level, we are looking at designs that use light water as a coolant and low enriched uranium as a fuel. Has a single per unit electric output between 50 and 350 megawatts electric. There is no restriction on the total plant power output. We intend to have these designs be interested in maximizing factory fabrication approaches for their nth-of-a-kind units. And then we also are looking at designs that include significant improvements, such as additional inherent safety features, among others. Another piece of information that is critical to this particular opportunity is our use of milestone-based other transactions authority. We plan to leverage milestone-based OTA for short for both tiers 1 and 2. So other transactions agreements are neither DOE procurement nor are they financial assistance. They are support instruments. So they really give us additional flexibilities during the solicitation and award negotiation process. And the use of OT agreements allows DOE and the selectee the ability to directly negotiate the commercial terms that govern the project. So under our OT structure for this solicitation, awards will be based on milestones and funding will be distributed based on the successful completion of milestones. So this slide helps you think about how we are considering the opportunity to place milestones in the context of an overall project. So we are looking for applicants to describe the proposed project in its entirety, recognizing that funding will be applied specifically to certain milestones on that project. We are asking applicants to propose milestones, including the estimated cost, the federal cost share requested, the criteria for their completion, and how the award of the specific federal share milestones would accelerate the opportunity for those to be completed. We are looking at, and I'll address this in the next slide, milestones that address major project events, ones that are capable of independent verification for quality and completeness. And then it's also important to note from a cost share perspective, the integral amount of federal payments made to the awardee upon each milestone completed cannot be more than 50% of the costs incurred from the time of award to that milestone payment. This slide shows you a list of some example milestones. There are additional milestones laid out in the solicitation document, but they give you an example of how we are thinking about independently verifiable milestones for each of the different types of opportunities in this solicitation. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Natali, who's been working with me in the Office of Clean Energy demonstrations and really thinking through the specifics of Tier 1. And then Mark will turn it over to our colleagues in the Office of Nuclear Energy and also in the National Nuclear Security Administration to talk through some of their roles. Mark?
All right, thanks, Christina. So what I'd like to first present to you is some important features about Tier 1 that are based on things we've learned since the NOI was issued and things we've learned from Industry Day. So next slide. As Christina mentioned, we're looking for a team-based structure to pursue the award for Tier 1. So this will require a teaming structure which will consist of a lead applicant and associated team members. To be eligible for Tier 1, the lead applicant must be a domestic commercial utility, an end user off-taker, a development company, or an incorporated consortium. We added this last group based on feedback from industry, which will allow a group of off-takers, utilities to team together and form a consortium to act as the lead applicant. Next, the lead applicant needs to team with a commercial utility if they aren't a commercial utility. The commercial utility is required by statute. Okay. And they must also partner with a Gen 3 Plus SMR technology vendor and an EPC. So while not mandatory, we do encourage teams to add other members such as additional utilities, hyperscalers, industrial end users, state and local partners, or private financing partners. The goal here is really to make sure that all the necessary pieces and team players are in place for a successful project that can be replicated so that we end up not only with the first of a kind Gen 3 Plus SMR, but we also are laying the groundwork to have many projects that can follow on quickly after that. Finally, one of the things that we've heard from industry is that while they are currently forming teams, all the members may not be present at the time of the application, which is okay. If that is the case, where all the members are not have not formed up at the time of application, we just ask that one of the very first actions be to finalize that teaming structure. Okay, next slide, please. Next, I want to take a little time to talk about the Tier 1 review criteria. You'll see here that there are 5 review criteria that all have equal weighting. They are the project achievability and potential impact, licensing and construction work plan, the financial viability, the management team and program partners, and the community benefits plan. There's a lot of good information in the solicitation about what will be involved with each criteria, and only some of it is listed here. So I really ask that you go and look at the solicitation for more details. But I do want to emphasize a few things. All the criteria that we have are designed to work together to evaluate the application and decide, why is this the right first of a kind project that will lead to an order book? How is this going to get built? How is this going to be paid for? What are the right team members? Are they the right team members? And do they have the right experience? And is this being done in a supportive community that will benefit from a project in a way that aligns with the department's goals and objectives? So these are the things that we're going to be looking at very carefully. And before I finish up, I'd like to turn it over now to my NNSA colleague, who's going to talk about a new opportunity for Tier 1 awardees to work with the NNSA on safeguards and security by design. Catherine?
Thank you, Mark. So on behalf of the National Nuclear Security Administration, we just want to say that we're very pleased to be a part of this broad agency announcement and to provide an opportunity to work with the Tier 1 awardees. So while we in the NNSA recognize that nuclear security, which is about preventing the theft and sabotage of nuclear material and facilities, and international safeguards, which is about preventing the diversion of material for a nuclear weapons program through IAEA safeguards approaches, normally isn't top of mind. So we want to encourage industry to think about security and safeguards now in the design phase and not just after the facility is built. And so we are hoping that this will help drive competitive advantage as security and safeguards are going to be requirements down the line, especially for the international order books. So what we are proposing is that Tier 1 recipients will have the opportunity to work with the NNSA to incorporate safeguards and security by design into the projects. And these efforts will help position the SMR vendor as a market leader with an exportable product that is compliant with these international legal agreements and is also deployment ready, scalable, and globally competitive. So NNSA is looking to provide 1 to 3 million in FY25 through 27 to be provided as direct funding to the recipients to build out and staff their safeguards and security teams, and also to provide in-kind support from NNSA and DOE National Lab subject matter experts. So again, this takes a variety of forms. We have categories for foundational assistance that include things such as training and regulatory reviews, also security by design technical assistance, so looking more specifically at the particular facility and some of the physical protection systems, as well as cybersecurity, how that's integrated, and what that may mean for that particular country or regional profile and threat environment. And then in terms of international safeguards, technical assistance, again, supporting engagement with the International Atomic Energy on safeguards for the particular design and safeguards assessments. So again, we really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this broad agency announcement, and I'll turn it back over to Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. We're kind of excited about that piece as well. All right. Lastly, regarding Tier 1, we do recognize that the amount of funding available for Tier 1 represents only a small fraction of what would be required to deploy a Gen 3 Plus SMR project, even at a 50-50 cost share. But we do believe that this amount of funding can be particularly impactful in helping to de-risk a project, especially for areas that require early capital outlay. Okay, with that said, when applying, applicants should specify how they plan to complete the project and the source of the funds that will be needed, the non-federal funds that will be needed to support the rest of the projects. Applicants should describe how they plan to complete it using either private investment, equity, loans, or tax credits. As Christina mentioned, since this is a milestone-based program, the scope of the award will be very well defined, which is nice because that will allow for LPO financing for project completion while avoiding overlapping scope. So for example, Tier 1 funding could be used for design and licensing and even early site preparations, while LPO financing could be used for construction and startup operations, but they have to be separate and distinct scopes. So if you are interested in pursuing LPO financing to complete the project, we also ask that you provide a description on how the project would also be completed with private financing as well. So we want to hear how you're going to complete the project. If you're interested in LPO financing, we still want you to provide a story on how it will be completed with private financing as well. Okay. And with that, I'd like to now turn it over to Melissa Bates, who is a program representative from the Office of Nuclear Energy, who will cover Tier 2. Melissa?
Great, thank you, Mark. So for the Tier 2 aspect of this solicitation, we're really focusing on those key gaps that can strengthen the domestic foundation, such that it can support those next movers in building out an order book to achieve that nth-of-a-kind pricing. We're doing this through 3 different sub-tiers. The first one is Tier 2.1, which is focusing on siting initiatives. This could take the form of either early site permits, or feasibility studies, or other things that an applicant would like to apply for, and define what those, what the end objective or milestones are. But really, we're trying to figure out or focus on things through this sub-tier that can reduce that threshold for entities to make a decision, with pursuing those next deployments. Tier 2.2 is all about the domestic supply chain. This could be projects that are, quite small, like getting N-stamp certifications, which are required for the design and construction of nuclear pressure vessels. Or it could be much larger items like the build out of modular fabrication capabilities here domestically. The third sub-tier is for SMR project improvement. This is, really focused on trying to improve that cost and schedule reliability for future projects. And so if an entity that is thinking about pursuing a future Gen 3 plus SMR project would like to supply their cost estimate and schedule estimate to the department, then we would fund the independent review of those documents. As you can see here on the slide, you can see the eligible applicants. Tier 2.1 and Tier 2.3 are really focused on the anticipated owner, or like a utility, the entity that would be owning the asset at the end of the day. Tier 2.2 is focused on partnering with the supply chain vendor that would be performing the work. And as we receive the applications under Tier 2, we will really be focusing on like, what are those projects that, looking together between these projects and the ones selected under Tier 1, like what will make the best suite of projects to really provide that right momentum, moving things forward here domestically. All right, next slide. All right, so the review criteria for Tier 2 is really focused on these 5 different categories for Tier 2.1 and Tier 2.2, and then we'll cover Tier 2.3. But for Tier 2.1 and Tier 2.2, it really goes into like, what is the strategic value of the project? Like, how does it help, like with domestically pursuing new nuclear? What is, the feasibility, quality, timeliness of the project? What is the management team? And then kind of flipping those backwards, but going into like the commercial readiness of the project, being like, what is the motivations of the entity behind it? How motivated are they, to keep the project moving forward, or is this something that they're only, somewhat invested in? And then finally, with the area of community benefits, it's very important for new nuclear to understand the community that the project is being proposed within, and to make sure that things are complementary there. For Tier 2.3, where this is the area that is looking for the cost and schedule estimates for new nuclear projects. Really, there's only one criterion for this, and we are wanting the applications to really go into an explanation of the project, to give us a sense of like, what is the confidence or things that that'll help us, gain that confidence that the project, has like a good fitting or foundation to build from, and like what is the confidence of that cost and schedule estimate as it moves forward. So next slide. I believe with that, I will pass it back to Christina to talk about the application materials for both tiers. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. So I want to highlight a few requirements and considerations that we're looking at in addition to some of the technical information that we just described. So every application will be required to submit initial community benefits plans, which will be refined during negotiations between the selectees and the department. And then for any project that potentially impacts Indian tribes, including when potentially impacted tribes are the applicants are required to submit additional documentation at the time of the application, possibly during negotiation and prior to award. All of these are laid out in more detail in the solicitation documents. And then finally, NEPA considerations, the National Environmental Policy Act, should be accounted for in the project scope, schedule, and budget. There's a link here if you want additional background and guidance on NEPA. We also have detailed some of the NEPA considerations that are specific to this solicitation in the document itself. All applications are due by January 17th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Eastern. So applicants will need to be registered in sam.gov and FedConnect, and you can look at these links here and in this PowerPoint in order to get to the next steps on each of these registrations. So with that, I'll share an overview of the next steps for this program and opportunities for engagement. So I want to give a little more detail about the overall process, especially given that we're using an other transactions authority process here and what that's going to mean for applicants. So as you can see in this timeline, we've already completed the beginning of this process with the notice of intent release as well as industry day. And now we're releasing the full solicitation earlier this month. So as we begin the application phase, our office will continue to be open for pre-application engagement for another month or so, but then we'll enter a quiet period on November 25th. So after this, we'll not be able to talk to applicants, more similar to a traditional funding opportunity that you might be familiar with the department. So you wouldn't be hearing from us until applications are submitted in the new year. So the only exception to this rule is that we will continue to answer clarifying questions through our email alias. That's gen3+smr@hq.doe.gov. So then the next phase will begin when applications are due in 2025. So we anticipate evaluating the proposals through a two-stage process. So stage one will be an initial evaluation with a traditional merit review-like structure. And then stage two will be where we work with finalists to conduct final reviews, oral presentations, and then to continue evaluations. So at the conclusions of these evaluations, selectees who are selected will receive their selection letter, and award negotiations will kick off soon after. For more information, this slide provides additional details and links that may be useful to you for more information about this program, as well as some of the resources that we mentioned today throughout the webinar. So that brings us to the end. On behalf of all the speakers, we appreciate you taking the time to learn about this opportunity. Thank you in advance for all the work that you and your teams are doing to consider responding to this opportunity, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.